What is going on, everyone? Welcome back into another edition of the Fan Committee Football Podcast, our first of the official 2024 league year. I'm Joe Tuman, one of your hosts, joined by my co-host, Michael Herrera. As always, Mike, we didn't get to do the pod last week. I'm glad we waited, though, because so much has happened in NFL free agency. How are you feeling about all these crazy signings, trades, everything that's going down?
Honestly, I've really enjoyed it. I think, like me personally, this has been one of the more interesting free agency periods. Because everyone complains that like the NFL is not like the NBA, where huge blockbuster trades happen every year. And I think slowly but surely, the NFL is kind of catching up a little bit. They're making these moves, interesting stuff happening, and I've really enjoyed it so far. Some of the signings were surprising, but I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been a really fun experience, so I like it. I'm having a good time with it.
Yeah, the NFL definitely controlled a lot of the sporting headlines, everything last week. I think it just coincidentally a ton of big name players, offensive players, just had their contracts kind of end in the same year. A lot of those running backs were on the same, I guess, time frame. But then also where we can talk about quarterbacks, some big name defensive players, a few surprising releases. Our teams have been making like not crazy moves, but at the same time maybe making themselves a little bit better. We can talk about that. But quarterback is the most important position on the field, as we know. And there's been a few big signings at that position. We can start with Kirk Cousins going to the Atlanta Falcons. I would argue that this is the biggest free agent signing that's happened because it's one of the better quarterbacks in the league, and he's going to a team that's already in position to maybe make an improvement, continue to position itself for a playoff team. What did you think about Kirk going to Atlanta? 4 years, $180 million.
I really like the move. I know everyone keeps talking about, the money. He's going to be 36 when the year starts. He's coming off the Achilles. But I think a lot of people are kind of overblowing the fact that, one, Kirk, I understand that he doesn't have the playoff success, but at the end of the day, this is a team game, and Kirk has still been statistically one of the best quarterbacks. He's not a runner, so the Achilles really isn't an issue for him. It is like people like Aaron Rodgers, because Aaron Rodgers, he used to be an improviser, but, he's gotten older, and the Achilles, like, it's different. So I think they made a smart decision. The team is well equipped to compete sooner rather than later. I mean, they brought in Raheem Morris, who people seem to really love. I really like the hire. And, they brought in some weapons for him. They brought in Darnell Mooney, Rondale Moore. I think it's a great signing. They have Kyle Pitts. They have Bijan. There's nothing really to not love about the signing. He's a good quarterback. He's going to spread the ball around. He's going to help these, pass catchers actually really break out, I hope, because they'll finally have a really good quarterback. So I really like the signing. I assume you would probably feel the same way.
Yeah, this was a perfect landing spot for Kirk for me. I really thought Minnesota was just going to re-sign him because they're in a win-now scenario right now just across the board. But lo and behold, he went to Atlanta. He got over $100 million guaranteed, and I already really liked the Falcons last year. I did pick them to make the playoffs. Of course, poor quarterback play, very poor coaching from Arthur Smith kind of made that not happen. But as you mentioned, I love the Raheem Morris hire for a lot of reasons. But bringing in Kirk, he's got that really great Falcons offensive line. And like you said, I'm not too concerned about the injury because of his play style. And we've also seen plenty of quarterbacks now over the past decade or so continue to play well into their mid to late 30s. Kirk's 35. He'll be 39 at the end of this deal. Maybe the last year of the contract is bad, but the first few years, I'm not concerned whatsoever about what happens. So I'm really confident that it's going to work out.
No, I agree. I don't know. I think people are just kind of overblowing it because it is a lot of money. I do get that it's a lot of money for an older guy. I'm also kind of surprised because I really thought, I remember we talked about this before free agency started, that I thought personally like Russ was going to go to the Falcons. I thought that might be a landing spot for him. And, ultimately he ended up on the Steelers for like dirt cheap because he's getting all his money from the Broncos anyways, which is, just absurd because those are two teams in completely different directions, which is also just kind of interesting to think about. But I do kind of wish the Falcons had made a few more moves because the Kirk Cousins is really the only thing they've really done outside of trading for Rondale Moore and signing Mooney. Mooney, great signing. He was just kind of underused in Chicago. I don't think like it was really him. And then Rondale Moore, I mean, there's a reason he got traded out of Arizona for just Desmond Ritter, but it's better than nothing. I mean, like they still also have Drake London, so I think they're going to be fine.
Yeah, I'm a lot more excited about the guys who are already there. Bijan, Drake London, just having more Kyle Pitts, just having more consistent role in the new offense with the new coach, with the new quarterback, compared to the kind of disastrous effect that it had last year. But their defense was already really good, so I think you pair that unit with everything they brought in on the offensive end. I think as long as they plug some extra holes in the draft, I think this team's going to be really good. I expect them to be the favorite in the NFC South. I expect them to make the playoffs. I even think we can get to the schedule way down the line, closer to the season. But off the top of my head, I would expect this team to get double digit wins next season.
No, absolutely. Because, like you mentioned, like the only thing really holding them back last year was not having a solid quarterback. Because they were a sneaky team. Like there were a lot of like close wins for them. They kept it close, and they played well. Like so, I do agree with you definitely that like they're very well positioned to be a really good team this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're in a good position, and my team's in the NFC, the Packers. I'm going to be scared of this Falcons team if they're playing them like opposite side of the playoff bracket. That's a team you got to be worried about. I think they're going to. I really think Raheem Morris is going to make a big difference, and obviously Kirk Cousins as well. Just that veteran leadership, I think, is going to be a massive leap forward. But you mentioned the Russell Wilson signing, and that's the other end of the spectrum. Like you said, he signed for the veteran minimum with Pittsburgh after Denver released him. The whole thing was, I guess, Denver, because they had to pay him that guaranteed salary, whatever the remainder of what he signed with his new team, Denver's going to have to pay it. So what does Russ do? He just signs for the minimum. Denver's got to pay his whole salary still this season. I don't know what Denver's doing, but for the Steelers, I mean, we saw they traded Kenny Pickett. They brought in Justin Fields. I thought the Kenny Pickett trade was pretty good. They moved up around in the draft. But I thought it was brave of them to move on from Kenny so fast, despite what some of their crazy fans like Alex Osman might have to say about that. But I think Russ is a huge upgrade for that team. Their defense obviously already really strong. They're already a competitive team every year with Tomlin. Do you agree that it's a big upgrade? I know some people are more skeptical that Russell Wilson could be washed. It might not be worth the effort for Pittsburgh.
I do understand where people are coming from, but I think ultimately I do agree that it is a big upgrade because even if Russ, as his plays decline, like he's a little less efficient than he used to be. Like he still has good numbers, it just comes with a lot of throwing. But like he's still playing well, even if it's not as great as it used to be, and if it's not as efficient as it used to be. And also, there's also the whole thing about how Russell Wilson doesn't really throw over the middle, which should be your bread and butter as a quarterback. But at the end of the day, he is going to be better than Pickett. I originally was kind of weird about the Pickett trade because it didn't really make sense to me. Because at worst, you keep him around for a year, see if maybe he develops, and if he doesn't, you just replace him. But then they brought in Justin Fields, which to me is still a huge upgrade over Kenny Pickett as the backup. Even like Justin Fields is, I think, much better positioned to like replace Russ. One, because their play styles are a little more similar than Kenny Pickett's is. I know Kenny Pickett is sometimes athletic or mobile or whatever, but like I think Justin Fields is a better quarterback, even if like he's kind of also had his weird up and down career. But both moves in conjunction is definitely like a much better, like way better than it ever was. And I do think this is the right move for the Steelers. So I would say it's a good move.
Yeah, and I like what you said about Fields. It's just if Russ said anything, if he goes down, they're not going to have to change the offense in a dramatic fashion. Now, I'm skeptical of Fields just as a passer. He really just hasn't shown a lot. I know he had a better year last year. I kind of attribute that to DJ Moore, though. We talked about Darnell Mooney, who kind of had a down year last year. I think it's less about him and more about that offense with Fields and the passing game as a whole just wasn't that effective. It's just DJ Moore is such a skilled player. He was able to
Mhm.
overcome that, unlike the rest of his teammates. I don't know. I'd be interested to see what happens long term for Fields, but for now, just looking at Wilson, I definitely agree. And they moved off Deontay Johnson. Really feels like they're trying to get younger at the position. I wouldn't be surprised if they draft a wide receiver. As we know, the
Mhm.
Steelers love their picking up receivers on day 2 of the draft. I'm sure they do it again here. I don't know. I was encouraged by Russell Wilson last season. I thought he was dealt a lot of bad hands between,
Mhm.
remember how bad Denver's defense was in September? They eventually turned it around, but you had that. You had Sean Payton, who clearly didn't want him there anyway. And
Mhm.
outside of Cortland Sutton, he just didn't have a lot of weapons. So I think this is going to work out. I think him and Tomlin are a good fit together. And I expect the Steelers to once again, as they always do, compete in that NFC North. I mean, they stole Patrick Queen from Baltimore. That could be a big upgrade for Pittsburgh's defense at linebacker. I don't know. I'm liking what I'm seeing from the Steelers right now.
I I kind of disagree about the Patrick Queen signing. I kind of don't like love it. I think it was very telling that it took him, I think, a few days to eventually sign his contract this year. And although he still got paid well, 3 years, 41 million, it's not what people were expecting. And I think it's because a lot of teams feel that Patrick Queen, at the end of the year, at the end of the day, he had his best year in a contract year, which always kind of puts some people off. And it was because at the end of the day, he had a Roquan Smith, who's one of the best linebackers in the league right now. I mean, he's top 3 realistically. And a lot of people think that he's masking some of Queen's deficiencies, which it's possible he wasn't. but I'm inclined to believe he might have been, and I think the fact that he didn't sign until a few days later was kind of telling of that. Although I do like one of the signings they made was Deshaun Elliott. I like that they signed him. It was unfortunate the Dolphins didn't bring him back, but Elliott's a solid thumper back in the secondary. I think he's going to be great for them, and I think it was a really good move. I don't love the Dante Jackson trade. I think they should have kept Deontay, if anything. But,
Really, I
I
think
mean,
they need to move him.
I do understand that Deontay Johnson has his issues. He's got the drops, the mentality, whatever. But Dante Jackson's like not that good. Like at least they should have gotten something better for Deontay if they're getting it. Like
I don't
trading
think they
Deontay
could have.
is
I
fine.
don't think they could have.
That's fair. That's fair. I think trading him was fine. I think the problem was the compensation they got, but you are right. That's probably the best they could have gotten, all things considered. And at worst, Dante Jackson's like a solid number three corner for them. So I do get that
Yeah,
eventually.
I think with the Pat Queen signing, it just comes down to A, they're stealing him from Baltimore, and yeah, he's probably a lot of his production probably came from being that off ball guy, playing off a great player like Roquan Smith, but he was still a first round draft pick. I still feel like he's a solid player, and he's still an
Mhm.
upgrade over who Pittsburgh had at that spot. Cole Holcomb's coming off a major knee injury. They don't know about his status. I
Yeah.
think it's worth the signing, but I agree with you. I don't think Pat Queen is an elite, like Pro Bowl level, All Pro level linebacker whatsoever. I know some people, maybe Ravens fans, might say that, but I think most people who really watch the games, they know Roquan Smith is the leader of that defense. Pat Queen
Mhm.
was a bit of a benefactor, but I also like the signing overall. That division, I mean, we said it last year, but even more so now, that's going to be super competitive.
Mhm.
Baltimore, they brought in Derrick Henry. We can talk about some of the running back signings here because last year it was all the running backs aren't getting paid; they're not getting the money they want. And this year it felt like a decent portion of them got decent deals. I know Derrick Henry only signed for 2 years. I think up to 20 million is what he can get, but I don't know. 10 million a year isn't too bad. I think 8 million was guaranteed. He was almost traded to Baltimore at the trade deadline. I think Tennessee should have gone through with that because they wound up getting nothing for their
Mhm.
star running back. But what do you think about him going to Baltimore? That fit in that offense, playing alongside Lamar Jackson under center.
I do really like the signing for Derrick Henry. I think it makes sense just as the fact that he's now 30. And I think Derrick Henry's kind of in this weird thing where he's kind of become like the Mike Evans of running backs. People kind of forget that he's so good because he's just so consistent and so he kind of flies under the radar. So I do think it's a good signing. I don't think his production is going to drop because of his age. I mean, that guy's a freaking mountain. Like I think he's going to be okay. Like I think his body's going to hold up just fine. And I think it's a great move for them. It adds a new dimension to the offense that like they previously didn't have with their running backs. Not that Gus Edwards wasn't good. He's just not Derrick Henry. I mean, Derrick Henry is just probably the most powerful running back. What he can do running people over, like that's a huge dimension. Like running a play action, like an option play with Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry. Who do you cover?
Right.
But although I do like the Derrick Henry signing, I think that kind of I don't know if Baltimore did a great job in free agency outside of that. Like I really like Derrick Henry, but they lost a lot of the key players. Like even though Patrick Queen, I think he benefited from Roquan Smith, who's still really good for them. They lost Geno Stone to not that big of a contract. Like I
No.
really thought Geno Stone was going to sign for more. I think he took a discount because the Bengals wanted him. But like realistically, the Ravens should have just kept him around. Like it was kind of weird they didn't just pay him the money. They kept Matabuki, which I understand. If you get pressure, you're generating pressure from your D line. It's easier on your secondary and your linebackers. So I do understand the reasoning behind that. But I think like just considering the money that was handed out to the players they lost, it feels like they could have done more to stop the bleeding, and they've lost a lot of key like players just on the team to free agency.
I agree with that. Geno Stone, I understand that he kind of benefits from the fact that he's got a ton of other great players in that secondary, and he wasn't. People aren't avoiding Geno Stone; they're avoiding Marlon Humphrey and Kyle Hamilton, so they're throwing his way. But guess what? 7 interceptions is still a really impressive season, no matter how you slice it. Guys aren't doing that too often. To lose him to a division rival for that cheap of a price, it really did surprise me. I think the Ravens, they've proven to me that they can restock that defense through the draft pretty consistently. So I'm not too worried about them. I still think they'll be right back in the race in the AFC, but you're not wrong. You're losing a lot of veterans. I'm interested to see if they re-sign Kevin Zeitler at guard. He's still a free agent, but a pretty important veteran on their offensive line. So he's still out there. Maybe they can bring him back. But overall, I agree. Besides Matabuki, I think they had to keep him, even though the price tag was really high. I think when you're getting that, like you said, when you're getting that many pressures in that position, that's not something that comes easy. So I think it was important they kept him, but also by keeping him, you lose a Pat Queen, you maybe lose a Geno Stone. So I don't know. I think their offense is only going to get better. Obviously, with Derrick Henry coming aboard, if Mark Andrews is healthy for a full season, I still think the Ravens are contenders. But you're right to raise some concerns about who they lost. Just to wrap up on the North here, what did you think about what the Bengals did? Because I think right now the trajectory they're on is that maybe even a last place finish in this division because they lost a lot of key contributors as well, and they might only keep losing guys depending on what happens with T Higgins and Tyler Boyd.
Yeah, although I do really like some of the free agent signings they made. Like I think bringing Zach Moss was cool since they traded Joe Mixon. I think bringing in Gesicki, he's definitely better than any of their other tight ends. Maybe it's kind of weird. He had a weird season in New England, so that kind of depends. And they brought back Von Bell, they brought in Geno Stone, they brought in Sheldon Rankins from the Texans, who had a really good year, surprisingly. Like I like the moves they made, but I do also see where you're coming from. Just like all the players that they lost, the moves they also couldn't make. I do kind of get it, especially with how strong the other teams in this division seem to be. It's also very dependent on, how is Joe Burrow going to come back from his injuries? Like these things take time. He seemed like he was beat up even before the season started, so who knows how that's going to be affecting him. And I mean, yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think the Browns have only gotten better because they were already a sneaky good team last year, and they've just kind of improved on that. So I do agree with you. The Bengals are not in a great position right now, and they should try to find a way to keep T. Higgins.
Yeah, I completely agree because their offense, I know their defense has been really strong, but at the same time, this team, like when they made the Super Bowl, that doesn't happen without the type of offense they have. If they lose T. Higgins, I understand it's a lot to pay two receivers, but this is the exception because if you have two of the, let's just say, top 15 receivers in the league, that's a huge advantage over pretty much any defense. And
Mhm.
I understand moving off of Joe Mixon because even though he's probably better than Zach Moss for sure, he is a little expensive at that price tag. But you move off Joe Mixon so you can pay T. Higgins. You let Chidobe Awuzie walk so you can pay T. Higgins. DJ Reader, same thing. To let all those veterans who've been with the team and helped get the team to the Super Bowl a few years ago, to let them all walk just not to pay him too and trade him, I don't understand it. I understand maybe they can replace him in the draft. But you're banking on you don't know. You already got a guaranteed stud in
Mhm.
house. Like if you're a team that knows it's on the cusp of contending for a Super Bowl, to me you shouldn't be getting rid of a talent like that, even if you can draft his replacement. We saw this happen with AJ Brown and Traylon Burks. I understand the Bengals still have Jamar Chase, so it's a little different, but
Mhm.
still, it's a similar argument for me.
No, I agree. I think it is possibly a good sign for the Bengals that we haven't heard anything about that he's being traded. He requested a trade because ultimately they ended up, I think, tagging him, which is different from the franchise tag. Hopefully, it's good news that they're trying to sign him. Like you're saying, like why lose DJ Reader and Awuzie if you're not going to bring him back? But it seems like they have to at least be trying because I feel like by now a team would have swept in and just traded for him. I think most teams in the NFL would be willing to give a first for T Higgins, like no problems asked. So
Yeah, maybe teams are trying to take them to the draft, like make them get a little more desperate to
mm,
make that move as it comes closer. I thought New England was a team that was going to go all in for him. They might still, because they didn't get Calvin Ridley, but I
mhm.
don't know. They signed someone. They signed KJ Osborne, so they haven't made a huge move at that position. They still have the cap space to do it. So I'll be interested to see maybe a team like that comes in. I know there could be plenty of teams that decide it's worth doing. But yeah, to me that's the biggest name left on the board. And he's not a free agent, but we know he's probably going to be moved. I don't
Mhm.
agree with it, but that's something to keep an eye on as the offseason continues. So I guess we can stay in the AFC here. We can shift to kind of our teams because that's where we excel the most. The Dolphins, they've made a lot of moves, a lot of guys in, a lot of guys out for cap space reasons mostly, but also a lot of your guys were free agents, didn't
Mhm.
necessarily have the money to keep a lot of them. Uh, just where's your mindset as a Dolphins fan right now? Are you liking the moves they're doing? I know we've talked about Tua before. That's not really a problem you can solve though. So do you think they're doing the right things to maybe amplify the Tua's offense going forward? Not just the offense, but the team.
I think that for the players we lost, ultimately at the end of the day, like I don't like I love Robert Hunt. I'm really gonna miss Robert Hunt especially. I was upset that there was no way to keep him, but I do understand it. He was like an all pro, so I get it. The Christian Wilkins thing, as much as I like Wilkins, paying him that kind of money he's not that kind of player. And a lot of people are upset that, like, oh, how can the Chiefs, who are perennially in cap hell because Patrick Mahomes has his $500 million contract, how are they still paying Chris Jones? One, Chris Jones is a lot more of a difference maker than Christian Wilkins is at the end of the day. I love Christian Wilkins, but he is much more of a run stuffer than he is a pass rusher. Chris Jones is the opposite. He's much more of a pass rusher, but still really good run stuffer. His run stuffing is pretty close to that of Christian Wilkins anyways. So people trying to make the equivalency between him and Wilkins doesn't make sense to me because Chris Jones is miles above Wilkins. And I love Wilkins, not to disparage him, but he's getting TJ Watt money and he's not producing TJ Watt pressure. So it just doesn't really make sense to me personally. And also Robert Hunt, I mean, like, shout out to him. He got $100 million contract, but like
That's
that's
going to be
insane.
the worst. He's a good player, but I think that's probably the contract that will age the worst as we go forward because, like, he's good, but also he only had one like crazy year. I don't view
Mm.
him as like the next Zach Martin. Maybe he'll prove me wrong. I don't know, but I don't
He
really
has to
trust the
be
Carolina
perfect.
Panthers decision making right now.
Yeah, no, like the Damian Lewis one, obviously he was a
That
little
was
overpaid
crazy.
in a sense. Like he's good, but like the Robert Hunt one I think is worse because like Robert Hunt has to be perfect. You have to be like Joe Thomas. You have to be the
Yeah,
perfect Iron Man. You're like cuz he missed a couple of games last year. So the moment he misses a game, everyone's going to be like why are we paying him all this money just for him to miss games? He lets Bryce Young get sacked. It's like over. From a PR standpoint and just like a team standpoint, it was not a good decision to sign Robert Hunt for that much. And it's crazy and I love him, but that was insane. So I
I was
think
the Damian Lewis one was kind of nuts too. I know he didn't get as much, but it's not
yeah,
like he was lighting it up for Seattle either. It's not like their offensive line has been perfect. So
yeah.
I don't know. The
It's weird.
Panthers are in a weird spot right now.
Yeah, but back to the Dolphins. The point is, I like that the Dolphins have gone more for signing, good vets, solid vets to cheaper contracts, try and build through the draft because we have a few high draft picks and kind of just work from there. For all the players we lost, I think we're doing a good job of trying to like stop the bleeding as much as we can. I think it really depends on the draft. I think we really have to draft well to really make this make sense. But I think if we can do that, I think the free agency has gone so far. I really like the Kendall Fuller signing. I'm a big fan of that one. I think he's going to be better than X. I think it's pretty telling that X has still not time in the team. A lot of teams understand that one, he's got a lot of off the field issues. I don't like X, and I'm kind of glad he's gone. On top of the fact that he's injured all the time, he hasn't played well. Even when he does play, like I'm okay with it. I like bringing in Jordan Poyer. It was kind of sucks that we lost Brandon Jones, but I think he also got overpaid with the Broncos. Like the Broncos, for a team that can't be giving out the money they're giving out, they paid him a lot, which was kind of weird because like I like Brandon Jones, but like why not just keep Justin Simmons at
Right.
that point?
Right. They're another. We have to get Buckman back on the pod because they're a mess. We already talked about Russell Wilson. I we can talk about Denver later. They could be maybe the worst team in the league next year. But with that aside, yeah, I think Jordan Poyer was a really for the price. I understand he's older. I know he's had some injuries, but stealing him from division rival, he can be. I think he's going to play great off of opposite Javon Holland. And then same thing with Kendall Fuller. Like he's been a number one corner in Washington, and he was solid. But now he's playing opposite Jalen Ramsey. We'll have to see if a guy like Cam Smith can take a step forward as well to be that third corner. But yeah, I think you're making for the hand they were dealt, where they knew they were losing so many key contributors because they were just going to be priced out because they're already paying a lot of money to other guys.
Mhm.
I think they masked it a lot better than some other teams would. Like we were talking about the Bengals, just how that they didn't really manage losing guys the way that a team that wants to be serious about a Super Bowl should. I think the Dolphins, on the other hand, have done a great job. Another sign you didn't mention, I think Janu is a
Yeah,
great signing for you guys because we know he can block. He's going to help your ever improving run game. And then I also think he proved last year that he can still be a solid receiving tight end. He has that athleticism. I don't know what happened in New England, but last year he was pretty good. So that excites me. And even we didn't talk about this, but Connor Williams coming off the knee injury, an all pro level guy last year, but bringing in Aaron Brewer. I mean, I sent you that article. I loved what I was reading about him. He can slide around on the
yeah.
O line, bring some versatility. So yeah, I think they've Jordan Brooks as well to replace Jerome Baker. That's not that much of a decrease, if at all, in talent. So overall, I think they've actually. I would go as far as say they've killed it just because they didn't have that many options, and I think the options that they did have, they've maximized.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think like you said, for the hand we were dealt, we've done a good job just kind of trying to pivot off of it. And I do agree. Yeah, I didn't mention Jordan Brooks, but those are two signings I really loved. I think they're great. Aaron Brewer especially. And speaking on our teams, the Packers. I think the Packers made some decisions. You guys made some questionable decisions, but I do like some of the decisions. Like I really like Xavier McKinney. I think that was a great signing for you guys. Darnell Savage is like he was like weird, like he was good his rookie season and just like didn't do anything after that. So like McKinney is like a huge upgrade.
Hmm.
Josh Jacobs like in a vacuum is cool because Josh Jacobs is a good running back, but I think losing Aaron Jones and also just like the PR that comes with the fact that like apparently they told Jones and Campbell that they were going to be on the team and then suddenly like they're gone. It's not a good look for free agents who want to come into the team. But I do like some of the decisions you guys have made. Like I
Yeah.
don't think you guys have done terribly considering you guys are a young team and you guys have a lot of potential going forward.
Yeah, my two teams over with the Sixers as well. We just have the most cutthroat GMs who are they're always going to take the analytical approach over, I guess, the heart to heart. So I don't even know what the word for it is. I'm not going to say dishonest though, because this is how, especially in the NFL, this is just how it is.
Hmm.
I'm not going to get upset at Goot for releasing Aaron Jones if he felt that was the right decision. I would disagree with the decision, but I trust him now to the point that I think he's proven to be a great GM. He's usually been right about these things. Like if you look at all the people that he's released, it hasn't really come back to hurt the Packers most of the time. And Aaron Jones, at the end of the day, will be 30 years old at the end of this coming season.
Hmm.
Now, that doesn't mean I love it because I think they could have let Aaron Jones play out his last year on his contract, then let him leave as a free agent. You didn't need to cut him this early just to save an extra $3 million when he already saved a lot of cap space by releasing David Bakhtiari, by
Hmm.
releasing Devondre Campbell, and
Hmm.
restructuring Rashawn Gary's contract. I don't think this needed to happen. I think Jordan Love would have benefited greatly from having Jacobs and Jones in that backfield together for a season. I think it would have been a huge upgrade over the AJ Dillon spot, who's I can't believe he's coming back. Even after we've released Jones, I'm shocked they re-signed him. But whatever. I don't know what to say about that. He's a good guy. Like he's a good locker room guy, but his performance has been so subpar that I did not think he was going to be back. But whatever. Maybe Emmanuel Wilson will move ahead of him on the depth chart. That aside, I don't know. I love the Jacob signing because he is only 26. You're giving
Hmm.
him a 4-year contract, but only 12 million guaranteed. So it's basically a 1-year deal, and then he can keep earning more years if his performance is up to par. But they had the cap space to do that deal and let Aaron Jones stay for one more year because he's the leader of the offense. Like at this point, especially with David Bakhtiari out the door, he's the longest tenured guy. He's the veteran. He's beloved in Green Bay. He was my favorite player on the team last year. Like that. Now that Rodgers was out the door, obviously, he took that mantle. I would say. And look, at the end of the day, this team is still going to be competitive. I don't think releasing Jones and going to Jacobs is going to be that big of a decrease, but just I don't know, just for vibe's sake, for leadership's sake, I do think it was the wrong move. But I also don't think it's going to haunt them that much because I don't think Aaron Jones is going to be as good as he was in Minnesota just because they're not going to be as good of a team. They don't have as good of an offensive line outside of Christian Darrisaw. So I don't know. We'll have to see. He did deal with injuries the past 2 years. I will say after he came back from those injuries, he had a great December, January run for the Packers. He helped them win that playoff game against Dallas. But I also think I understand the skepticism, like, oh, if he's already getting injured, even if his performance is there, how long is it before the performance slips with the injuries? I see the thought process. We've seen it happen with a ton of other running backs. It did disappoint me though. But you did mention the Xavier McKinney signing. This is exactly what I wanted. This was my top target for the Packers in free agency, especially with Jeff Hafley coming in as defensive coordinator. Everyone's talking about how much he loves to use his versatile free safeties to roam all around the field. It's a perfect fit for the scheme. The Packers already needed a safety anyways before they hired him because the safety play has been so poor the past 2 seasons. But now you have a schematic fit who's also a drastic upgrade. Pretty good contract, 4 years, 68 million. I think that's pretty fair for the type of player he is. He's one of the best safeties in the league. Still pretty young. I think they hit a home run with that signing, and I can't complain too much about the other moves they've made because they brought back Keyshawn Nixon as well, who's a great kick returner. I think they've done a really good job uh, maximize like the Dolphins, maximizing the spots that they had. They had a space for one big signing. They went out and made it. They take a risk on Jacobs, who yes, he's coming off a down year, But I think you can attribute that a lot to the fact that the McDaniels offense was so poor, and then by the time things turned around with Pierce, Jacobs got hurt. He had that quad injury, missed a month. But the year
Mm.
before, he had a great season. So I'm confident that they're doing the right thing, and I think they're going to keep getting better. They have so much young talent. Uh, Come draft time, I think they're going to have to draft during the draft. I expect them to address maybe a few more defensive positions, but right now I'm really happy with where they're going. But I will miss Aaron Jones, of course.
Yeah, no, understandably. Like, you guys haven't made a lot of moves, but it seems like you guys brought back the important players. And the Packers also draft pretty well, at least from like other than like the draft Aaron Jones came out of, where like he's like the only player that stayed around longer than like 3 years. You
Mhm.
guys have done a really good job with your drafts. I mean, you found a lot of good sleeper picks in the later rounds. I mean, Dontavian Wicks and Romeo Dobbs, like those are guys who are now key receiver. Well, Romeo Dobbs more than Wicks, but like they're key receivers
I
to
would
the
say both.
team.
I would say both.
They're both good, yeah, but like like you guys draft well, so like I do totally get why you're not also like super concerned. I do like I agree. The Xavier McKinney signing great. He's only like 24, I think, and he's already like a team captain for the Giants. He clearly knows what he's doing. He knows how to manage a locker room. He's going to be a great pickup for you guys. We could be looking at like an all-pro season for Xavier McKinney. He's great. He's like a rising star, and I really do love that position for you guys. I like the Josh Jacobs signing as well. I really was excited because I thought it'd be cool to have Aaron Jones there, but I like, I get both sides. I get that he was getting older. I understood your point about like, maybe he starts to dip with the injuries because of the age. So I do get it. But I think ultimately, I think you're right. I think the Packers have also done a great job with what they were handed to them.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the rest of this NFC North because I think all these teams are making some really strong moves. Detroit, they didn't really have to do that much, but they picked up a few veterans. I think they brought in Carlton Davis,
Yeah.
just a good flyer because they need some help at corner. He's been a good defensive back in the past. He's a good veteran to take a risk on. But then the Bears, I think Ryan Poles, he did a great job last offseason, but he's killing it this offseason, in my opinion. Signs DeAndre Swift to join the backfield with Roshan Johnson and Khalil Herbert. I think that's a lot of good weapons in that backfield. Uh, Obviously, at this point, with Fields out the door, Caleb Williams will be coming into this team, and he's going to be the day one starter. What do? You go out and get Keenan Allen for a fourth round draft pick? An absolute, I don't care if he had 1 year left on his deal. That's an absolute fleece job after
Mhm.
the production he put up the past 2 seasons. You pair him with DJ Moore and even Cole Kmet, who's a rising star at tight end. Their defense has continued to improve over the past 2 years. It's a young unit, but they've also drafted really well over the past couple seasons and made some good signings last winter as well with TJ Edwards in particular. So I really think the Bears will they make the playoffs? Maybe not necessarily, but I think they're going to be competing in this division with the other three teams. And then Minnesota, your guy Brian Flores is the defensive coordinator, and they went out and got him some big weapons. They got Jonathan Grenard from Houston, who's an improving edge rusher, had 12 sacks last season. Obviously, we mentioned Aaron Jones. He's now a Minnesota Viking, which I absolutely hate, but it's a great fit for him. They needed a running back with some more versatility. You can play three downs. We'll see what happens with Ty Chandler. The only thing I'm obviously concerned about with the Vikings is that their quarterback is either going to be probably like J.J. McCarthy or Sam Darnold because they lost Kirk Cousins and there wasn't really a viable replacement. What's your thoughts on the Bears and especially the Vikings? Because I think there's a world where either of those teams could make the playoffs, but I also think it's a long shot. But I think they'll be pushing the Lions and the Packers in this division at times.
I think the Vikings, unfortunately, will not be the team that's going to be like more competitive. I do understand the thought process of Sam Darnold's been dealt a bad hand his whole career, and he'll be a bridge guy. Just take a flyer on him as the bridge guy. Bring in, it seems like JJ McCarthy because apparently the rumors are swirling that they really like him. And I'm not a JJ McCarthy hater, but I think they were in a position to continue improving. So I do agree with you earlier. You mentioned how like it was kind of surprising they didn't just bring back Kirk, which I agree with. The timeline for the team was like it's now or never. And so it kind of feels weird that they're pushing it back a little bit, especially now that they have to give Justin Jefferson his extension at some point. And that's a lot of like cap space you're taking away from other positions to keep building and retooling the team. So it feels kind of weird that they didn't, just bring back Kirk. And, you can still draft JJ McCarthy, just keep him around for like another year. Sign Kirk to like a 1 year incentive deal. Like it would have been fine. But
Well, I don't
I
think
think
Kirk would go for that.
well, no, but I guess it's also to be fair, like, we don't know how much they tried. Kirk might have just said it was time to move on, which is totally understandable in that case. But I just do think that, like the Bears are much better positions. Like you mentioned, like the T.J. Edwards, Tremaine Edmonds, like those were great signings last year. This year they brought in Kevin Byard, who his play has dipped a little bit, but he's still a solid starting safety. They signed Simone Biles' husband, which is great for
Right.
him. Congrats, your career's continuing.
Oh my god,
Um,
he's lucky his career is continuing after the way he played last year.
yeah, yeah, it's kind of weird. I do think the Bears are going to be good. I know people like to complain about Caleb. They're like, oh, he's got character issues. I don't Look, man, disagree with his opinions all you want, but like he's a good player. Like you don't who cares if he paints his nails? He's great. People like to say, "Oh, he didn't win enough in college. He gave up on his team." One, we don't know if he gave up on his team. Two, winning is obviously important, but like it's still a team sport. If your defense sucks, you can't if you can't stop the other team, it doesn't matter if you're scoring 50 because they're going to go score 70.
Right.
So, but like he's going to be a huge upgrade over Justin Fields. Unfortunately, I like Justin Fields and all, but Caleb Williams is going to be miles better than him, or should be at the very least. And I just think the signings they made are great. I do agree with you that the Bears are in a prime position to do really well this year.
And Minnesota, I think their defense is going to be really good, but it just comes down to quarterback play for me. And also, they got to stay. Everybody's got to stay healthy. We just talked about Jones, but then Hawkinson and Jefferson were both missed some time last year. I'm not worried about Jefferson too much, but
Mhm.
still, you got to have everybody on the field in order. If you're already taking a risk at quarterback, you need everybody at the skill positions to be healthy if you even want a chance of that team making the playoffs. So, but overall, I think that division is going to be really competitive. One last team I wanted to look at. I thought the Eagles. Howie Roseman does it again. I think they had a tremendous free agency period. Saquon Barkley, I think, is an amazing signing for them. It's exactly what they needed. They lose Swift, yes, but bringing him home on a pretty reasonable contract. I mean, $12 million a year can go up to $15 million. Listen, I understand Saquon's had his injury issues at times, inconsistency with the Giants and their poor overall play, but behind that Eagles O line, even without Kelsey, I think there's a very good chance he earns that $15 million, and you'll happily pay him that salary if he's a top 3 running back in the league if he can get to that point. So I think that's a
Mhm.
good contract. They bring C.J. Gardner Johnson back after a year away. It barely hurt them because he was hurt most of last season anyway, so he's right back where he left off. And overall, I mean, I don't think they lost anyone too drastic. They wound up keeping Josh Sweat. They brought in Bryce Huff on a really nice contract, so I don't know. There's still some rumors about maybe Hassan Reddick gets traded, but other than that, I think they're in a great spot, and I expect them to be right back in Super Bowl contention next year.
Yeah, I think they're gonna be fine. I think like Hurts had a down year. Like it happens. The Eagles they lost both coordinators. It's complicated. I get it. It happens. Like the Eagles are going to be okay. I do agree. I really like the Bryce Huff signing. I think that one's great. I really like the Saquon signing. That one's also really good. CJ Gardner Johnson, I'm shocked he came back after he said that he hated Philly.
Yeah,
So Howie Roseman, he knows how to sweet talk the players. He knows how to bring them back. So shout out to them. That was a great move by them as well. Like that's a huge boost for their secondary. And so I agree with you. I think the Eagles also did a really good job.
yeah. I'm really excited to see what they do this year. You mentioned the coordinators. Last year they lost their 2 coordinators. I like the 2 they brought in, Kellen Moore, Vic Fangio. I think that's going to help elevate this team as well. So real fast before we wrap up, I just wanted to go through some of the best free agent signings, like the individual players that we've seen move. So what did you think about Brian Burns? He's not a signing, but he got traded by the Panthers to the Giants. We know that a couple years ago the Rams offered 2 first rounders for him. The Panthers wound up only getting a second rounder and a fifth for him. I just thought that was an interesting move for both sides because I didn't think Carolina needed to trade him. I know they're rebuilding, but that's a building block. He's still relatively young. And then on the Giants end, I don't know, you lose Saquon, they kind of have no identity on offense. So I guess they're trying to load up on defense, but it's still a big commitment when you don't really know what direction you're going. At least the Panthers have Bryce Young and a young team. The Giants, I just feel like are in no man's land. What did you think of that move?
I don't love it. I think one, they overpaid him in terms of like the contract he's given. I like Brian Burns. At the end of the day, like he's not I think he's like top 3 now in like terms of rushers being paid, and he's just like not a top 3 rusher. So I think it's kind of dumb. I understand that he's young and there's still that upside there, but like
He's
had a
really
lot.
good though. I don't mind the salary. It's more just like the team. I just don't get what the Giants are doing.
Yeah, I mean, like I personally feel he's a little overrated. I do like him. I just think he's like a little overblown. He's never been the difference maker that like people like to say he is. Me personally, like I just think like the Panthers D line has not been as good as you'd expect with players like Derek Brown and Brian Burns on it. Like Derek Brown's been really good, but I mean, I guess that's kind of like that's up for debate. But I do think I agree with you. I think the bigger issue is that the Giants are just like not really in a position to be making a move like this. Like you have so many other problems you need to fix that you should have tried working on those first. Like yeah, they brought in Singletary to replace Saquon, which is like fine. But what about your receivers? Trade that second for like a receiver or something if that's the case. Do something or like at least try to like
Go get T. Higgins.
go get T Higgins. Yeah, trade for T Higgins. Like do something.
I agree.
So I think yes, I agree with like the bigger issue is more the Giants. Just like it doesn't really, we don't really know what they're doing, and so like that's kind of like where it's weird with them.
The one thing I'll give them slight credit for is some people thought they were going to draft a quarterback, even though they gave Daniel Jones a massive contract. But we saw with the Drew Lock signing, kind of signifies that they're going to go receiver, which I think they have to get a receiver. Like they have to. And it seems like they will. But even that, say it's Roma Dunze, even him alone, he's just going to get doubled his whole rookie season. So they're still going to be in a disaster. Their offense is still going to be disastrous. I don't know. It's just to me, if I was the Giants, I would have held back on that trade. I understand Burns is so good, but I agree with you. It's kind of just a bizarre move for both sides. Because honestly, I kind of like some things Carolina did just around the margins to help improve Bryce Young's situation. And I wouldn't have minded them keeping a defensive difference maker like Brian Burns on the other side. Now you've just weakened your defense, which was already the strength of your team, but now you've taken it a step back. So they're another team. We talked about them earlier. I don't know what they're doing either. So both those organizations I'm not too thrilled with. Here's a signing I like. Tyron Smith to the Jets. That was a huge ad for them. They're going to need it with Aaron Rodgers, future Vice President Aaron Rodgers. He's going to need some protection at left tackle so he doesn't get injured again. Obviously, last year it wasn't the offensive line's fault. He just had a non-contact injury, but he is 40 years old. That's a huge improvement on the O-line for the Jets. Tyron Smith proved last year that when he's healthy, that's been a concern for him at times. When he's healthy, he's still one of the best left tackles in the league. What'd you think about that? I thought that was a really good signing for a team that needed something like that.
I do think it's a really good signing. I just agree with also the problem is kind of his injury concerns because he is also older, so the injuries typically start to stack up more at that point. So I do totally get it. But I also do understand, like, Tyron Smith, when he plays, like you said, he is really good. So I do understand the risk they're taking. Like, they have to do something to try and improve it. So I do get it. And, they still have some good young guys like Elijah Vera Tucker like on the O line, so like I think they'll be okay. They also brought in Morgan Moses, which isn't like as a big of a deal as Tyron Smith, but like that's gonna help also on the O line. Nothing wrong with that. So I get it, and I do agree with you. It's a good signing for them overall.
Yeah, and a few more here. I saw the Rams. They brought in Jonah Jackson from the Lions, a guard. They also re-signed Kevin Dotson, a guy we both had on our All-Pro team for the season he had with the Rams. So they're up in their interior offensive line play. I think the Rams made some really solid moves overall in this free agency period. A couple just small things. I think they're very much in position to contend for Super Bowl next year as long as you have someone like Cooper Kupp stay healthy with the additions they made in the draft over the past 2 years. I just think the more protection you can have, the better. They're going to hope Kieran Williams playing behind that offensive line continues to elevate. So do you think the Rams just where's your head at with them? I mean, it's just an offensive lining signing. They did lose Aaron Donald to retirement. That was the big move, which is kind of surprising for me just because he was on the team last year. He didn't retire after the really poor season. I guess he wanted to go out with a better, a more successful campaign. But what do you think about the Rams? Do you think they're positioned to contend for the Super Bowl, or do you think maybe they're just going to be where they were this year?
I would say so, yeah. I think they've done a really good job drafting. I mean, Puka Nakua, like, they found him in the 5th round, and this is now, like, arguably their number one receiver just because Cooper Kupp's had his injury. So, like, that's the debate there. Mm-hmm. But and although it sucks that Aaron Donald is retiring, and I love watching Aaron Donald's play, especially, like, in the early LA days, like, what a monster that guy is. But I think they're going to be fine. They're really good at drafting. Sean McVay, people like to say he's overrated sometimes. Oh, he's just an offensive guru. But, like, the defense was really solid last year. It sucks that they lost Raheem Morris, but, like, I have a lot of confidence that, like, Sean McVay knows how to, like, fix the team and, like, do what he needs to do because, honestly, like, people weren't expecting the Rams to even be good last year, and they still made the playoffs. I think the Rams are going to be good. I think they're going to continue improving. Jonah Jackson's a huge signing for them. Kevin Dotson coming back and having a breakout last year, which is why they brought him back.
Right.
I mean,
right.
The Rams know how to develop and trade and sign and draft players. So I think the Rams are totally going to be okay. I think they're probably going to draft a quarterback early-ish because Matthew Stafford's older. and he unfortunately had the injuries last
Little
season.
little Michael Penix to the Rams. Actually, you know what they did? They picked up Jimmy G. That
They
that's a
did,
great
yeah.
signing. That's how you ensure that if Stafford has another issue with his shoulder. I know Jimmy G's had his own injury issues, but that's a great backup quarterback to have
Yeah.
if you want to be serious about staying in the playoff race if something happens to your quarterback.
Mhm. No, I agree. I think the Rams are going to be good. I think they're a great team. I really like them, and I think they're very well positioned to contend for Super Bowl as things are.
Agreed. And one last thing I wanted to touch on before we wrap up. One more big signing. The two big signings, actually. Two receivers. I've liked Hollywood Brown going to the
Mhm.
Chiefs on a 1-year deal. They needed a little help at that position. And then also a lot more money. Calvin Ridley, surprisingly, going from Jacksonville over to the Titans, who they spent some money. They also added Tony Pollard at running back. So kind of shuffling around. But all of a sudden, Will Levis has a lot more offensive. They did lose Derrick Henry, but he has more options to throw to in that offense. They signed Chidobe Awuzie as well. So, what do you think about specifically Ridley and Brown, but I guess also the Titans?
The Titans, I think they did a good job. I like some of the signings they made. I thought Awuzie is obviously a good decision for them. It sucks that they lost Henry, but I think Pollard, although he's definitely a different skill set, they still have Tyjae Spears, who's more of the power runner of the two, so they'll still be okay. They can still kind of run the power, like Thunder and Lightning. But Pollard, I think he's as good of a replacement in terms of just like raw skills and like how good a player is to replace Henry, who's on the market. So I think that was a good decision for them. Ridley, they did pay him a lot, but I also get it because like they just don't have any receivers. You know, I mean, like he just came back from like the suspension, so last year he was a little like up and down, but like he's still a good receiver. Like I totally get it. It makes sense to me. But I do really love the Hollywood Brown signing. I think that's going to be huge for the Chiefs. At first, I was kind of confused that they got rid of MVS. I know he had the drop issues, but he was
Come
their
on.
field stretcher. Well, he in the playoffs. To be fair, he played well in the
Playoff
playoffs. And
MVS is a real thing. You're right. You're right.
he was good when it counted, so I was kind of surprised that they got rid of him. But then they brought in Brown, so I totally get it. Like it's kind of like at the very least it's even.
Mhm.
So I do love the Hollywood Brown signing. I think that's a great place to start. I still think they should draft a receiver, but I think that was a great move for Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, and let's just talk about the Chiefs real fast, then we can wrap up. I think they're very much the new Patriots in the sense of, and I don't mean that in terms of you should hate them, although some people do. I mean in the sense of the way they're making these roster moves to keep their team together. It was all okay. They can only pay one of Chris Jones and L'Jarius Sneed, but then Mahomes out of nowhere. I was walking with Alex Osmond on the way back. He was very upset when he saw the notification. Patrick Mahomes, $15 million pay cut for this season, or maybe even it was even 20. And all of a sudden, L'Jarius Sneed, he wanted him in Pittsburgh. He's staying with the Chiefs on the tag for $20 million. Chris Jones gets his big deal. So two huge contributors for KC are staying in town. They pick up a speedster in Hollywood Brown. Once again, I think they killed it. Brett Veach killed it this offseason once again.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Chiefs did a good job. I think Mahomes, he got the 500 million. He's
Yeah.
totally clear to like just take his like restructures and cap hits. Like they'll be fine.
I guess we can end here. Do you think the Chiefs can three-peat? Because right now, they're pretty well positioned to do it.
Yeah, I I really do. Like even last year when everyone was like when they lost that first game of the season to the Lions, everyone's like, it's over. The Chiefs, they're done for, which is like such a huge exaggeration. Come on, guys. And like the fact that they're still able to do it on top of the fact, Mecole Hardman caught the game-winning touchdown. This guy wasn't even on the team until halfway through the season.
And he had that huge play earlier in the game, too. He did nothing all season. Then the Super Bowl, boom. It was like Kadarius Toney the year before. Two big plays out of nowhere.
They, like, the Chiefs know what they're doing. Like, Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Travis Kelce, Veach, like, they know how to run a team. They know what they're doing. And I know people want to hate them because they're the new Patriots. I don't really care. Maybe it's because since I'm a Dolphins fan, I just really hated the Patriots.
Mm-hmm.
The Chiefs are good, man. Like they know what they're doing. Like people didn't even expect them to like make the Super Bowl this year.
I was one of them. I was a doubter, but now at this point, what am I going to say any year? You have to buy in now.
Yeah, I mean, people who want to count the Chiefs out, like unless Mahomes goes down with season-ending injury or he's retired, there's no reason to count the Chiefs out at any point. Like they should always be considered Super Bowl contenders at the very least.
Yeah, that's the lesson I learned. I thought, their receivers are dropping the ball. It doesn't matter that their defense is good this year. Come on. It's Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. I should have known better. They were going to get the job done. I did really think the Ravens could beat them, but we already talked about that on a previous podcast. Once the Ravens abandoned the run, it was over for them. Now, with Derrick Henry in town, as we touched on, maybe that'll be a different story this season. But I agree. The Chiefs are very well positioned to continue contending for Super Bowls for years to come. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Fan Committee. A lot to go through. We had a lot to go through with this free agency pod. We didn't even touch on everything, but that was the important stuff. Hopefully we'll be back as the draft gets a little closer. Who knows, Mike? Maybe we can do a mock draft, even though neither of us really watch college football that much. But that could be fun. That could be fun.
Yeah, we could try one.
All right, maybe we'll do that in the coming weeks. But that's going to do it for this edition of the Fan Committee. Make sure to follow on YouTube and Spotify if you aren't already. And other than that, have a great rest of your day. Thanks for watching.